Hope everybody's well, and that you're hearing my voice. Most of you, except for the co-host, Judith Lynn, should be muted. There will be opportunities for you to participate in the webinar, but you will need to manage your microphones, and then as the co-host, Judith Lynn will be assisting in that process as well. Explore some of your controls there. You should have raise your hand. You should also have chat. There should also be a Q&A window there. And so you might want to play around with those a little bit just so that you get familiar with the controls so that you can participate fully in the webinar for this evening. We have quite a few that are joining us tonight. Delighted to see that and hear that. Everybody's joining in. Fantastic. As a webinar, we'll mostly be usually listening. Tonight, for reasons that we will make obvious in a moment, we want your participation. So with that as a beginning, what I want to do is I want to just give you an opportunity to start participating by answering a poll as you get started here right at the top of the hour. So just take a moment there. You're viewing the questions. If you would, just answer the question multiple choice. You can answer more than one. Which of the following social media platforms do you use currently? The answers are coming in. I'm hearing music all the time. Yes, until we get started, just enjoy the music unless it's too loud for you. Ten out of 13 answers already on the board. Looks like everybody is using Facebook. Looks good. Good question, Jonathan. Do you mean which platform as a church or individually? I think that's a good question for us to talk about a little bit later. Is anybody in your church on your personal platform? If so, then are you using that also for your church purposes? I would answer for either of those if anyone in your church is on your personal individual platform as well. All right. Almost all of the answers are in for the poll. And that's great. Good. Good. We have a few more that will be joining us, but I don't want to take any longer to wait on them. We'll go ahead and get things rolling. I'm going to give you one last chance, one other answer to come as of last here. If you want to answer the poll, you've got about 30 seconds to answer the poll. Glad that you're with us tonight for this Social Media for Churches webinar. We are the IBC, and we are glad that you've joined us. As we look at tonight's webinar, just as we get started, I'm the host, Scott Corwin. I'm the Building Connections Core Strategy Director, and I'm hosting with the help of none other than Judith Lynn, who is the Developing Resources Core Strategy Director. This is her brainchild, and she was the one to help sort of coordinate and get this together. We have some special circumstances regarding our webinar this evening. Judith, Lynn, would you care to say hello and then just kind of give a little bit of the background behind tonight's webinar and how we are sort of flying by the seat of our pants tonight? Would you do that, please?
I will. Thank you, Scott. During our GCGW Ministry Leadership Conference, somebody came up to me and said, social media is great, but we need to know how to even get started. We don't even know how to get started. And that started the idea for hosting this webinar. We asked Joy Rudolph, who does the social media managing for the IBC, if she would do the webinar for us and present the information. Unfortunately, Hurricane Dorian had other ideas. Joy's located in Florida and has boarded up and taken refuge from the storm. And so she's not able to join us tonight. And so Scott and I and Lorraine, who's been a part of this as well, decided to go ahead, and we're going to try to field your questions and learn from each other as we talk about social media in IBC churches.
Thanks, Judith, Lynn. Appreciate that. And we're glad that you've joined us. We're praying for Joy as she is boarded up and waiting out Dorian. But we're going to go ahead and try to facilitate some conversation. That's the reason why it's important for us to just kind of sort through some housekeeping issues here as we get going. You'll see the results of the poll. All of us are using Facebook. I'm a bit shocked that nobody's using Twitter, but Instagram, YouTube, WhatsApp is used regularly. Messenger is the next strongest of the media that's used. And interesting. That's good. That's interesting, and we'll talk about strategies for using some of those. As I said, we'll need to take a look at some of the just some of the controls that you have available for you. You see on your screen now, here in the lower left-hand side, if you have any problems with your, sorry about that, if you see any have any problems with your audio settings, over here on the lower left-hand side, you can just click on that, and what happens is you will have a window pop up, and you can adjust either your speaker or your microphone. You will be needing your microphone this evening because we'll be asking you to give some interactions. One of the ways that you can actually interact and use your microphone is by raising your hand, especially when we have many different people participating. Go ahead and raise your hand by just clicking on the hand. It will be indicated that you've raised your hand. We will see that. Judith Lynn is helping me here, and we will recognize you and call on you to contribute at the times where we'll be doing some conversation and discussion. There's also a place for Q&A, and you see the chat over here as well. Chat and Q&A are the primary means for us just interacting. And it might be helpful if, just as we get started, everybody would just go to the chat window and just type in your name and where you're participating from, your church, your IBC church, and where you're participating from. That way we'll all have an idea of who's with us, and we can then kind of celebrate the fact that God has given us a wonderful big family, and we're from all over the place. The Q&A window will also be available to you, and you just click on that little Q&A, and what you'd have is you have a pop-up window where you can put your question into that. That question goes to Judith Lynn, and periodically what we will do is we will read those questions, and then we will also attempt to answer those, not necessarily from us as experts, but we will wrestle with them together since we're doing this without Joy tonight. So with that as kind of a background, that's some of the ways that we're going to participate and we're going to get involved tonight. So let's jump in, and as we get started, what we're going to do is we'll just pause for a word of prayer, and then we'll jump into a presentation here. Let me pray for us. Heavenly Father, we thank you that the gospel good news is something that is worthy of being broadcast to the whole world. And we're thankful for this new medium of social media, that it gives us the opportunity, enables us to share the gospel, to share your truth, to share our lives as churches in ways that can serve your kingdom purpose. I pray that as we talk about these matters tonight, that you would guide our thinking, guide our hearts, guide our actions, that we might indeed be faithful, be people of integrity, and that we might proclaim the gospel message that you have in store for a world that's lost and in need of Jesus Christ, in whose name we pray. Amen. So, thanks for being a part of tonight's Social Media for Church webinar. I'm sorry that Joy could not be with us, but in light of that, what I'm doing is I'm just trying to facilitate a conversation with you all using some resources that I've had available to me out of self-defense, simply because I had no idea how to manage the social media ministry of our church. And so a while back, I reached out to this guy right here who is of Pro Church Tools. And what we're doing is we're using one of his articles as a basis. Brady Shearer wrote The Ultimate Social Media Strategy for Smaller Churches. And what I've chosen to do is just kind of use this as a backdrop for our discussion tonight. It's not original to me. I am not an expert in these matters. I'm going to depend upon your questions, your answers, your insight, your experience, and perhaps we can help one another in this process. So as we get going, here's just a basic backdrop to the reason social media has such a tremendous impact on our lives and consequently on our churches. If you'll look at the screen in front of you and just kind of scan that, you'll see that social media reaches into all dimensions and areas of our society. And if you look at that, you can see that social media does have an important role to play in our world today. That's the reason why Brady says this: social media is not a fad, it's a fundamental shift in the way that we communicate. And his premise is that since it's a fundamental shift in the way that we communicate in society, that it's also important for the church. And that's why he quotes this motivational speaker that we'll look at in just a moment on the matter of that. But as we get to that place, let me just ask you by chat, by microphone, if you'll raise your hand, why would you say social media is so important for the church today? Why would you say that? Somebody want to jump in? Chat, Q&A, raise your hand, unmute your mic. Judith, Lynn, if somebody raises their hand and you see that and you want to just call on them, please feel free to do so.
Okay.
I don't see any raised hands yet.
Daryl.
Big D. Go for it. Daryl?
You can always count on me to have something to say.
Good for you, brother. You need that.
No, I'm reminded that, we live in a digital age. Some have put it like this: it's the new world, and in this digital age, we're digitally connected but geographically dispersed. Mm-hmm. And when you start talking, and that's the world over, but when you talk about the context of international church world, I mean that hits us right where we live. Mm-hmm. So that's one reason why I think the social media is so important, because we live in a new world and it's called the digital age.
Good point. Thanks, Daryl. Thank you. Somebody else, chat. Here's something. Jimmy says to connect with church members. Absolutely. Tim says because people are more active in selecting what they want to be a part of. That's exactly right. They're very selective, and that comes to matters of social media as well. Yes. Anybody else? Question, chat or a raised hand?
Jonathan just said, because it allows us to stay in touch while we are on the move, as we hold mobile jobs.
That's a good point. We're constantly on the move, and it helps us stay in touch. And one of the points that we'll look at in a little bit, a little more in depth, is that when we stop and think about it, our churches are on the move all week. Yeah, Daryl mentioned that people first visit your church virtually. They do. They visit your church virtually on social media. And that has some important implications for how we choose to do social media. So social media is important. And as a result, what we're wanting to do is we want to try to wrestle with this matter here. Here's that motivational speaker that is quoted in this resource. It says, businesses, and we've added churches, don't have a choice on whether or not to do social media. Their choice is how well they do it. And so tonight, one of the things that we want to do is we want to work hard on making sure that we try to do social media well for a purpose. Good question here that Esther writes, and she says, at the same time, we tend to have information overload. So how to use social media best? Excellent point. How do we avoid social media overload? And I think that's a great question that we need to wrestle with. And I'm going to make sure we make a note of that. And how do we deal with overload? Thank you so much. That's a great question. Here's a way for us to look at it. So what is the point? What is the point? What's the main thing? What's the point of social media? If we could boil it down just to 2 or 3 statements, what would you say is the point? Perhaps it's a distillation of some of the things that we've said are important. What is the point of using social media? Chat? Raise your hand. What would you say is the point? Do you have the option of staying off of social media? All right, nobody has the point on the tip of their tongue. To inform, communicate, to engage, to connect, says Jimmy. Jonathan says adapting to the Great Commission. Connecting people to the church, Caroline says. I think those are a great summary. To communicate to your target audience. Joe brings out a good point there. A target audience, who is your target audience, and communicate to them. Tim says it allows us to stay connected and for people to connect to us. Connection is a real key there. The point, here's how Brady summarizes it real succinctly. There's 2 primary purposes. One is to engage your congregation and reach out to new people. I think some of the things that we said are captured in the summary of those 2 particular points. Engages your congregation and it reaches out to new people. Both of those things are ways that we can indeed use social media, and some of the things that we've mentioned here are captured in these 2 statements. I'd like to try to share with you just a brief video. It's 3 minutes that is done by the person who has given us this material. Here he is right here. I'd like for you to listen to this, because in this short video what he does is he gets to the point, the main thing about social media. So let's listen to this and listen to it with the idea that you're going to come away with a takeaway or what you heard in this particular video. Here we go. Let's listen.
Most churches have a presence on social media, but are still doing social all wrong. And in this video, I'm going to share with you a simple social media strategy that every church can use. Well, hey there, I'm Brady Shearer from ProChurchTools.com, helping you seize the 167 hours beyond your Sunday service. We publish new videos every single week, so make sure you hit the subscribe button below. And if you like this video, make sure you hit the like button as well. Social media should be important to your church for one simple reason: attention. The average adult spends about 6 hours per week on social media across all demographics. 7 out of every 10 American adults is on Facebook. The opportunity that social media presents our churches is tremendous, and yet churches continue to be confused by how to best use social media. So let's fix this confusion if we can. The best place to start is with this simple question: what would your church post online if your Sunday service didn't exist? I'll ask it again. What would your church post online if your Sunday service did not exist? Because this is the question you need to ask yourself to really begin to understand social, how it works, and how to thrive on it. So let's back things up a little more. What is your church's mission statement? Why does your church exist? What is the driving force behind what your church is trying to accomplish? If you're like most churches, your mission statement is rooted in the Great Commission, the greatest commandment, or some combination of the two. Your church's mission statement can be summed up like this: love God, love people, and make disciples. So if that's the starting point for what your church is trying to accomplish, how can we accomplish that mission statement on social media? What would your church post online, and how would you accomplish your mission statement if your Sunday service did not exist? And the reason this question is so important is because we use our church services and events like crutches on social media all the time. Instead of developing an actual content strategy, instead of posting native media that's valuable on its own, we just point people to our events and services. Instead of meeting people where they already are, where the average adult spends more than 6 hours every single week, we try to get them to meet us somewhere else. Come meet us at our weekend service instead, we say. Imagine meeting someone for the first time, shaking their hand and saying, "Look, come by my house Sunday morning at 10:30 a.m. and I'd love to tell you all about myself." Or imagine meeting up with a friend and saying, "Man, I have got some big news to share with you, some great news. Come by my house on Sunday morning at 10:30 a.m. and I'll tell you all about it." Well, that would be absurd. Your friend would respond and say something like, "Well, we're both here right now. Why don't we just talk about it now?" What would your church post online if your Sunday service didn't exist? This is the starting point for developing a social media strategy that works. This doesn't mean you should never post about your church's events or your church services, but it should be a small fraction of what you're doing on social. So start with your church's why. What is your mission statement? And then figure out a way to accomplish that online, aside from your services, aside from your events, aside from your weekends. If you liked this video, make sure you hit the like button below and definitely subscribe to the Pro Church Tools channel. We post new videos like this one every single week, helping your church seize the 167 hours beyond your Sunday service. If you've got questions or comments, leave a comment below. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Most churches have a...
All right, very good. There was Brady. What did you hear? What's one takeaway from the video that you can share with us? Raise your hand if you'd like to comment. Otherwise, put something in the chat window there. What's one takeaway? What did you hear? Or perhaps, what did you see? Crickets. There we go. That we really need to question why we post. That's exactly right. Thanks, Nikki. Caroline says the main thing we post on social media should not be inviting people to our services or events. That's right, Caroline. That was something I heard loudly as well. Yeah. Daryl, jump in, unmute your mic.
Yeah, I love the question he posed, how to best use social media. And then I think his example was, advertising events at the church may not be, I think his point was, is not necessarily the best use of social media. Mm-hmm. So I think in addition to just the, technical aspects of how to use social media, it's It's for what purposes?
Mm-hmm.
What purposes are we using it for? Because it would be absolutely the wrong medium for certain purposes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good point. Very good. Instead of trying to get people to come to us, what are we taking to people? Thank you. Thank you for that. Melanie says, I heard that we can do much more than we already do. Meaningful stuff needs to be put up there. Yeah, stuff that feeds people, that meets people where they're at. Yeah, and Jimmy says, social media does not duplicate the worship service, but connects us for all hours beyond the Sunday morning event. That's exactly right. Great takeaways, what you heard. I saw something as well. And that is, if you really want social media to take off in your church, find somebody that's in their 20s. Those are the people that are tech savvy. I just recently had a group of 20-something people come up to me and say, hey, we're talking, and what would you think if we developed an app for our church? And I'm kind of like, yeah, thank you very much. That group has a lot to offer. And social media and ways to leverage social media is something that they can really offer to your church. Here's something that we want to just kind of highlight here. I want to run through this just to kind of give you a little bit of content, and then I want to make sure that what we do is we give enough time for dialogue and conversation. Brady goes on in this particular article, and what I will do is I'll share with you a link to this article, and you can have this in writing. But he talks about these 5 pillars of social media that are philosophies that guide your social media decisions. It's not the specifics, it's not the actions, but it's just the philosophies that sort of guide that process. And here's what those are. He says, first of all, don't try to do it all. Don't do it all. There's so many different social media apps and means of connecting with people out there. Don't do it all. He said, be selective. He recommends these 3 in this order: Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can read about some of his reasons there, but you don't do it all because what you want to do is you want to do something and you want to do it well. So he recommends don't do it all. Just do something, but don't do it all. Second, he said, be yourself. Your social media personality needs to be an accurate reflection of your church. In other words, your social media needs to show some integrity about who you are and how you present yourself. So as an example, I'm going to show you a picture, and in this picture, I want you to try to identify one thing that is reflective of perhaps your church, but it's true of my church, but one thing that is not true of my church. I would never show this picture on one of our social media platforms. This picture I would never show. Can you imagine why I would never show this picture? Daryl says it's a bad tie. Jimmy says it's a tie. You are exactly right. I would never show this picture because this guy's wearing a suit. People at our church don't wear suits. I don't wear a suit. I don't wear a tie. I dress very casually. It's the kind of atmosphere that we're trying to create at our church. If I put this on there, it would be a false statement about our church. There's something that's true about this church that I work this picture that is very true of our church that we work hard to present in our social media. What do you think that is? Bible, yes, that's good. Carrying the Bible, that's one. There's another thing. Smile, that's great. I like that. The smile, yes. Diversity, that's exactly right. My church is about 60% people of color. And so we're very careful to make sure that that's what we reflect as best we can in everything that we do. And so being a person of integrity is being social media of integrity means reflecting who you are. Be yourself. Don't try to be something that you're not. Brady says to avoid as many stock photos as you possibly can because it automatically creates a false impression. So be yourself is the second of the things here. He said, listen, make sure that you're listening to people on social media. So often we're trying to push something at people on social media, and he says, use social media as an opportunity to listen. And I don't know exactly where he got this from, but he said something about a wise man once said this: my dear brothers and Facebook users, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen and slow to speak. The point he's trying to make, the wise man James, is that we need to listen and use social media for feedback and listening opportunities. The other thing that he mentions here, just two last things, and then I want to move to some interaction. He suggests that we give value as opposed to just inviting people to our events, and we've already mentioned that. And then he says, start these things and repeat. It takes a while to build trust in social media. Get a good philosophy, get a good approach, and keep doing it is what he suggests there. So with that as kind of a backdrop of what is going on with social media, the important thing for us to talk about and to think about is what actionable items can we do in terms of social media that allow us to put some of these things into place. Do you have any comments or questions or statements that you would care to make about some of these approaches that Brady puts on the table for us regarding social media? Any insights about listening, about delivering content, perhaps consistency? Any comments or questions at this point while I get a drink of water? Okay, if not, feel free to jump in at any time, raise your hand. Judith Lynn is closely watching that and can break in anytime needed. Feel free to make this interactive. I'm just trying to work through something that Brady has helped me with here. Here's what he calls some 8 actionable items that are very practical things that we can do in our social media ministry. First of all, to keep social media interactive, to respond to every comment. If people take the time to interact with you, appreciate it, comment on it, like it, be interactive with social media. It's not very social if you are not interactive. And so he suggests that connecting with people digitally is a way to begin to connect with them other ways as well. So respond to every comment, even if it's simply a like. He suggests to post often. And I don't know about you, but this is something that I've wondered about. It's interesting that that we are questioning what kinds of posts and how often. What would you say is an appropriate frequency of posting? Have you seen anything about posting that has given you any insight to this? Brady comes up with a very specific suggestion given what we said a little bit earlier, especially when it comes to this idea of information overload. Information overload. How often is too often to post? 2 to 3 times per week, Jimmy suggests. Is there any, are you saying on Facebook? Is that what you're suggesting? Because the social media medium makes a difference. It makes a difference. 2 to 3 times per week. Yeah. His suggestion is you post at least once a day on Facebook as a minimum, that you post as many as 3 Instagram posts a week and 1 Twitter a day. And so that's one of the comments that he makes. A couple of comments that are coming in here. Tim says, just curious, how much time would you spend? As a church leader, this sounds like a scary proposition with the little margin that you have. Agreed, Tim. Some of the suggestions that have helped me at this point is you, as the leader of the church, should not be the one that's doing the social media. You can supplement it, but you shouldn't necessarily be the one to do that. The other thing is if you can come up with a means by which to facilitate it that saves you time. So, for example, Hootsuite or Buffer are a couple of social media delivery products that will help you trim the time that you actually invest in doing social media yourself or for your team. And so that's a good question. Delegate it if you can. Use a social media aid to support your posting, and it cuts down your time. Susanna asks a good question. What if I do not like or do not agree with the comment? We'll get more specific and more into that in just a moment, but that's a very good point, responding to every comment. And how do you respond to negative comments? That's a good question. A good question. We'll look at that on this next slide. Another good question, Nikki asks, should the posts all be different posts on Facebook and Instagram? I don't have any wisdom there. Maybe somebody else has some wisdom and can answer that. I do know that cross-connecting and cross-posting is something that is quite popular, and consequently it attempts to target different audiences because different target groups use different social media. We realize that with the teenagers and the young adults, most of them are not very active on Facebook, but they are more active on Instagram or on WhatsApp, and so using those as a means and trying to cross-post to some of those is helpful. But I'm not sure what the recommendations by the experts are. When it says, yes, go ahead.
Sorry, I think that we as the IBC post the same thing on Facebook and Instagram. Mm-hmm. We do one post of on both mm-hmm. mediums.
Are they the same?
I think they are. Yes.
Okay, that would be cross-posting, and that's one of the things that I've seen suggested as well, just to meet different target audiences. Great questions coming up here. What kind of posting should we aim at? Wishing a blessed day, everyone, seems too simplistic and shallow versus a long devotional. Great question, Jonathan. It can just suck up all of your time if you're not careful, and then you don't want to be too trite. I think it goes back to some of the points that were made earlier. What is your purpose, and how are you trying to accomplish your purpose? And how do we deliver important content to people? I'll tell you one of the ways that I try to do that, and that is I find people that are doing regular posting from different ministries that fit who we are. And what I like to do is I like to have a regular repost of what they're doing to share that particular post. So for example, one of the things that I would include in my posting every week is, since I'm an IBC church, I follow the IBC page, and I like to repost and share what IBC does to my church page so that it is in front of our people. And that takes, if we've got a couple a week, 2 or 3 a week from the IBC, that helps keep that in front of people's faces as well. Yay, Jimmy says. I think that's a thumbs up from Jimmy. The 80-20 rule that you see on your page right here is the rule to structure your content delivery versus your invitation. The 20% is inviting people to what you're doing. So using social media as simply a way to advertise or promote events should make up only 20% of what you do. Brady is suggesting that 80% of it should be something like a simple devotional. So for example, if you're on YouVersion, your church is on YouVersion, you can share a verse with an image. And our social media strategy is such that what we try to do is we try to, as much as possible, begin the day where everybody goes to their Facebook page or their Twitter feed, and what they do is they see a verse of scripture that comes from our church, and we try to somehow tie it into the verse of scripture for the day, tie it into something that we are either talking about in our church life, I'm preaching on on Sundays in a sermon series, or just tie it to our bigger picture vision of be a disciple, make a disciple. And so we try to do some of those things by using some of the other sources. Share stories, and when it comes to sharing stories, nothing beats videos. If you can share stories with videos, that's fantastic. And just telling people stories, short testimonies with pictures. One of the things that I'm just thinking of right now, going back to something that I just said, is maybe you can put in the chat some of your favorite sources for sharing or reposting, so that you're delivering content to your church that is something that fits your church. So for example, I mean, I would put the IBC Facebook as one suggestion. There's Yes, He Is, which is an evangelistic group. YMI is a very interesting group of young adults out of Asia that are doing some really creative things around art and singleness that meet the needs of some of the people in our church. What are some of the things? Gospel Coalition articles, okay? Doing that, excellent. Yes, great. Just continue to put some of those in the chat there, and maybe it can inspire some of us to look at some of those other things as well. I'm going to go ahead and move to the next slide, which kind of brings to a conclusion these 8 pillars. Don't try to be perfect. You'll drive yourself crazy trying to be perfect with social media. It's not going to happen. Your perfection will not happen, but just be as consistent as you possibly can. One of the suggestions that Brady makes is to comment on current events. At the same time, be very careful that you're not intentionally and purposefully wading into controversial matters that stir things up and create more heat than they do light. There's a place and a time for those kinds of things, but I don't know about you guys, but I've discovered that Facebook is a terrible place to try to be understood in a dialogue. That's the reason why for the most part, I don't try to engage people in a discussion about controversial matters on Facebook. Although it doesn't keep me from posting things that might be controversial, I certainly don't take up the conversation there, and I try to avoid that on the church page. But nonetheless, some people in my church see my personal page, and they ask questions, and we have conversations offline about that. Keep it light. He suggests using something of humor every once in a while, just to make sure that people see all sides of life. And then to the question of what do you do if you don't like somebody's post, or if you don't agree with their comment, kind of a thing. Brady suggests that you deal with the haters with grace and consideration. I'll give you an example of how this happened to me recently. If you do not have already your church listed with a simple Google business page, I highly recommend that you do that. Just go to Google Maps, put your pin on the map, set up your Google business page and people search and find you. You can put directions to your church and all those kinds of things. But we get a lot of feedback on our Google site, and we had somebody that came and rated our church a 1 out of 5, and he left the following comment. He said, "You guys talked way too much about Jesus, and there was no consideration for people from other faiths." And I thought, well, praise the Lord for that. That's great. But I got back with him and I told him, I said, I'm really sorry that we weren't clear with you up front that we were very Jesus-centered. At the same time, the service that you attended was also attended by a Muslim woman who had her head covered, and there were also some Hindus in that service. All of them had been invited by friends to come to a special service. And so I just tried to make sure that he knew that we were very Jesus-centered, but that we welcomed everyone. So trying to deal with the haters with grace is one of the things that was easy for me in that situation, because that's a criticism I like. But dealing with people in those ways can be challenging. Was privately between the two of you. Tim asked the question, was that a public back and forth or privately between the two of you? That was a private between the two of us. It was offline. The initial comment was public. The other side of the conversation was private. So thanks for that question, Tim. All right, I've done way too much talking. Let's take a look at some of these things here. Let's just get some interaction either via chat or if you would care to just speak by voice here. Let's look at these things. What's your biggest frustration in social media right now? What's your biggest frustration, and how can we perhaps together give you some help with that frustration? Somebody want to raise your hand, or would you care to just put it in the chat, maybe even ask a question? Political haters. Yeah, political haters, a significant frustration, that's for sure. I agree with that. We have prohibited all of that on our church group page and our church page, which is perhaps another thing. Yeah. Matters that aren't relevant. Yeah, that's frustrating, isn't it? Too many flaky posts. Jonathan, I love that. That's so true. Self-centered posts. Yes. I assume that all of us are plagued with that bent towards self-centeredness, and it is a bit frustrating, that's for sure. Quick question, are you guys making use of both opportunities on Facebook, a church page, which is kind of like your quote business page, but then also a group for your church members to interact socially? We've intentionally created a group that's a closed group. We allow people to join it if they are a part of our church family, regular participants, so that we can have a place to connect and interact, whereas our church page is a much more public presentation of who we are and what we're about. But that's one of the things. Any other frustrations in social media? The volume of good material that I don't have time to work through each day, yet not enough interaction with the groups that I'm a part of. Yeah, it can be very overwhelming. There's so much good material, and this goes to the question that we looked at earlier, and that is information overload. You're going to have to be selective, and you're going to have to decide what to post and what not to post, because when you start over-posting, then it just dilutes whatever message you're wanting to communicate, and it certainly does affect that. But Tim, you're exactly right. There's so much good material. out there, and it's just you have to be very selective. That's true. Not always sure of the credibility and authority of the post. That's a good point, Jonathan. Having to do some background research and making sure that the source is indeed a credible source, and being selective about that is certainly true. That's good. Very good. What about, go ahead and keep on posting your frustrations, but what's one social media practice that you do well? What's one thing that you can, just say, yeah, we're doing this pretty well. Daryl, you got your hand up there.
Yeah, I was just, I mentioned my biggest personal frustration, I think, with social media has been the reality that I just, I don't get it. I don't understand it. I'm with you up to like Facebook, kinda, but you lose me at Instagram, and so the way I have got over or conquered that frustration and fear and insecurity was to do exactly what you mentioned earlier. I found someone half my age, maybe more so than half my age, and it's been remarkable how very little input I need to provide to her. And then she makes all these phenomenal posts and Instagram and she just turns it into masterpieces on social media. And I just gotta resolve, that, when it comes to the digital world, this new world, the digital world, millennials or younger people, they were born here. They were born in that world. I'm an immigrant, and I'm never going to understand it the way they understand it. They were born and raised in it. So for me personally, I just have to just get comfortable with the fact that I don't understand how it works. And I found someone to take care of that and do great things for us.
Good. That's so true. And thanks, Daryl. I suffer from your ailment, and that is age. I just don't get it. Facebook, okay, maybe, but the others, get somebody younger. The interesting thing for me, in the point that you're talking about, is it's great sitting down and talking with a young adult about our mission and our vision and our strategy as a church, and seeing the light bulb go on in their eyes and them becoming a part of that through social media ministry. And so it's a matter of also training and equipping somebody that's younger, and that's a rewarding part for me as well. What's one social media practice that you do well? You hand it off to somebody else that's younger, perhaps maybe fluent in a different social media. Somebody else, what's another social media practice that you do well? Let's move on to the next one here. What's one way we can support your social media ministry? What can we do to help you? One of the things that I'm going to suggest is that we actually schedule a time in the future where Joy can share with us her expertise, and we can move beyond me simply having an article that's been helpful for me. That's great. Nikki writes, I thought I was doing well with my 3 posts a week, but now I'm wondering about that frequency. Explore that. Look at that, Nikki. Once again, none of us are going to do it perfectly. You're out there. Keep on, repeat, and you'll land in a good place. Another webinar. Good. That's great. This is good. Esther says, I have a YouTube and Instagram account related to my business, which I'm really good at. Fantastic. YouTube is one of those things that you can use. We've recently gone to doing some of our regular training classes, recording videos and putting them on our YouTube channel, and giving people in our church the opportunity just to watch them and to do training that way, because people are from all over Berlin. But YouTube, man, that's fantastic. I wished I could get in to some of that expertise myself, Instagram and YouTube. Thanks, Esther. Tim says, tell us a little more about your church's secret closed group and what you have learned there. What's working well? What's the greatest challenge? We've basically just set up a group on Facebook, just like anyone may set up a little Facebook. We have a group set up for our kids ministry team. We have a group set up for our youth ministry team. Our leaders have a closed Facebook group. Our church has a Facebook group, and so what we do is we tell people about it, invite people to the group, and what we do there is we just try to encourage people to be a lot more personal and a lot more engaging on an individual personal level, sharing celebrations, sharing prayer requests, sharing pictures of what their home group has done, outings, retreats, those kinds of things. So what we try to do on that is to interact on a more personal level. And what we do on our church Facebook page is try to engage people in our mission just in a higher level. So those are the kinds of things that we do. What's working well? Our page is working much better. Our group, depending upon what group it is, can go up or down depending upon activity in the group. Sometimes the church Facebook group gets neglected for a while, and you see a flurry of activity. So there's a lack of consistency there. So that's how I would respond to that. Hopefully that was helpful there, Tim. Jonathan asked a good question. Is it possible to give a few pointers about honoring people's privacy and lining it up against local laws? Judith, Lynn, I think this is in your area of expertise.
I'd actually like to throw it to Lorraine if she doesn't mind speaking. She's done a lot more about GDPR than I have, so I'm going to.
Good. Lorraine's got her hand up, or there we go. We'll get her microphone unmuted. Welcome, Lorraine.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a minefield, GDPR. I think the best that you can do, I mean, one thing is basically.
Oops.
Sorry, I tried to get her picture up.
Oh, please don't.
There we go.
It's really okay. I mean, if people are on Facebook, they've got to expect that, you know, you're going to be tagged, you're going to show up on photos and things. So to not be too concerned about it. What we do at our church, for example, with photos, what we do most Sundays, we have an assigned photographer from our creative team, but they mostly take photos from behind or of people that they know will be okay with that going on our Facebook page. So people are in leadership or just active in the church, or they just make sure to say to them, I've got a great photo of you. Is it okay if we use that on social media? And generally people are totally okay with it. Just be very careful with visitors, be careful with refugees, be careful with people who work for government agencies, consulates, embassies, that kind of thing. So just making sure that whoever's doing your photographs knows your people and knows who it would be okay. But, you know, it's fine to do shots from behind or from a distance where you don't really see people's, or there's a lot, I'm not really a photographer, but, you know, you get these photos where you're zoned in on one person and they're crystal clear and the rest are fuzzy, things like that. We do a live feed, a Facebook live video every Sunday, mostly just to, sometimes all the service, sometimes just parts of it. But again, that is just shot from the front. So you only see whoever's on stage. And I think even with GDPR, there's an assumption if you're at a public event, you might be photographed. And also if you're up on stage, you will most likely be photographed or publicized in some way. So be very careful with children. If you're going to shoot children, make sure you've got written permission from their parents, I would say. Yeah, so I mean, and we used to have our children come forward in the service for prayer before they went to their groups. If we were doing the live feed, we would tilt the video up so that it didn't show the children's faces. So I think be careful with children, be careful with refugees, people who are working in sensitive jobs, security issues. and really just try to focus on the ones you know. Otherwise, if people are commenting stuff, that's their choice. So yeah, you have to. I mean, theoretically, there are issues even with closed Facebook groups, and you should have written permission and all of that. But if you overthink this, you'd never communicate with anybody. So you just have to make sure people are very aware of what you're doing with their information. And if they don't want to be part of that, they can ask to be removed. So in that care.
Good. Thank you. Thank you, Lorraine. That was helpful. Thank you. Any other questions? Melanie said here regarding that in our church we ask them if they give us a consent what to post and not. We're making that a part of our membership class as well. When we gather information from people at the bottom of the form, we ask people to tick the box. And if they don't tick the box, then we just make sure that we see that we don't have permission to use their picture in some way, shape, or form. And then we always check with people if it's one of the restricted types of pictures like Lorraine was talking about. That's good. Thank you. Any other way that we can support your social media ministry? We are quickly coming to the end of our agreed upon time. I don't want to drag this out unnecessarily long, but I also don't want to rush you. If you have any further comments or questions, please be sure to put those in the chat. The chat is saved, and it's something that we can return to and go back to. Thank you, Susanna, for the kudos there. I appreciate this feedback, and we will have access to the slides as well as the recording. We will make those available through IBC resources, and we'll do that. If you need to get some help with any of these things of just sorting through some of this, feel free to contact me. My email address is on the screen there. You can also contact Judith, Lynn, and you can also contact the church office. As we kind of bring this to an end, let me make sure that you remember IBC Day is coming up on the 6th of October. Judith, Lynn, you have some things that we can use in social media for that day, do you not?
We do. We are debuting, premiering our new IBC video on that day. It will be loaded up on our YouTube channel by the 22nd of September, so you can download that and show it at your church. We're also, we've done a trailer about the video. It's a 2-minute trailer that you can show to whet people's appetite. And we're working on 2 other very short videos using Doodly, a new tool that we've discovered to do animated videos. And so we hope to have those ready as well. We've also got a social media blitz going on promoting the IBC. It started at the beginning of September and is running through the annual meeting in the middle of October. So please like us on our Facebook page and share those posts with your churches. Some easy, as Scott said, it's some easy free posts for you to share with your churches during this time.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Judith, Lynn. I got one other thing for International IBC Day, and that is Jimmy Martins will be in Berlin. I had to get him early for that day. So we're happy that Jimmy will be with us in Berlin to celebrate the IBC. So as we just kind of bring this to a conclusion, thanks for joining us. And as we are saying our goodbyes, if you would please, before you do so, just over in the chat window there, just answer this question real quickly. What subject or topic would you like for us to cover in a future IBC webinar? I've already heard you say that we'll take up this topic once again, and we'll invite Joy to present what she's already prepared for us, which is some really good stuff. So what we'll do is we'll have some other other webinars for you as you would like in the future. Thank you so much for being a part of this. If there's some way that we can help you, that's what we're here for. The IBC is helping you to mobilize and multiply a disciple-making church. So if there's some way that we can help you with that, please let us know. Thank you very much, and good night, one and all.